Hello, Kerry. My name is Ray Silva. This video I'm making here is for you. It's for you and your community. I'm going to walk through the upgrade to a machine that has a little bit of a history to it. I'm going to go through the history of what I will call a gaming machine, and you'll see why when I go through the parts that are in here. And I want to share some of the experiences I had in deciding what components I should pick to upgrade this beast here. Learned quite a bit, and I watch your channel. You've taught me a lot, no question about it. And that probably is one of the reasons I was anxious to build this. You get the bug. If you've built a machine before, there is nothing like the feeling of hitting that power button and seeing a machine that you put together come to life, and then having the pleasure over 5-10 years of having that machine just do wonderful things for you. It's just a level of satisfaction that you really need to build a machine to appreciate. And I appreciate your channel. I appreciate what I learned from you. You're going to see a lot of references to what you taught me in here, like the Mugen 5 cooler I'm going to use. But I'm probably more of that 2% that you talk about. I tend to push my machines. I do lots of different things. They always say when you give a presentation, tell people what you're going to say it, and then tell them what you just told them. So there are some major takeaways that I want to get in up front, because you may or may not watch this video to the end, and they're important. The first is, why would you build your own machine? And if you notice, people like myself and Kerry, we call these machines, not computers all the time. They are machines. They are doing things in there that, even though they're relying on transistors and something called a processor and so on, fundamentally, they're sophisticated machines. And they have a use, like any machine. These particular ones have many uses depending on the software you put in it and the kinds of things that you're trying to do with it. So I tend to be one of those 2% probably that Kerry refers to that pushes my machines pretty hard. And not as hard as a lot of people. Out of that 2%, I'm probably more towards the 98%ers than I am the people that do graphics and 3D printing and some of the other things that people do. But I do a tremendous amount of photography work and video work, and I've done it for years. I have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, possibly millions at this point. Photographs, videos, and they can be pretty demanding on machines, especially my experiences over the past 30 years of trying to use these machines to take my old VHS home movies and convert them to digital and then make DVDs out of them so I could hand them to my family and they could watch them on their DVD machines. I recently took those videos and many of the photographs of my children growing up, and I digitized them and put them on hard drives. I bought these 2 terabyte hard drives. They cost, geez, I was able to get them for about $50. And imagine that, 2 terabytes, $50. And they were high-end drives. They were good drives, Seagate drives. And I put all that information on there as a Christmas present to my children and my grandchildren so they could see home movies of their mom and dad and their grandparents. And I even have films from the 1950s of my grandparents. And my baptism, my sister's baptism, the family gathering at that event, all now digitized, all distributed to multiple houses, multiple homes. And my hope is that someday my grandkids will sit down and see where they came from. It's a very powerful, wonderful thing to be able to do. So, with that in mind, I am going to upgrade this old gaming machine with a newer 11th gen technology And as I go through that, I will explain some things to you that you might not otherwise get on Kerry's channel. He tends to build rock solid machines that will work for almost anybody who wants to try and build a machine. He goes off occasionally, you know, he'll do some high-end stuff. But for the most part, if you're going to build a machine and it's your first time out, I would highly recommend, one of the major takeaways, highly recommend you follow his parts list. For the simple reason that there's more to it than just picking any old motherboard and any old processor. You're probably already aware that the sockets change about every 2 years or every 2 generations. So the machine I'm putting together today is going to have an 11th generation processor and a motherboard that's more or less pretty high-end motherboard with a Z590 chipset. Now that chipset is generally used by people that want to overclock and push the machines to the maximum. Honestly, I don't do that. I'm very cautious. I would rather have a rock-solid machine that just because of what is inside it will crunch my data quickly. I don't want to play around with crashing. I don't want to play around with worrying about whether my processor is heating up too much. I just want to get the job done, and I want my machine to be reliable and not choke when I put a very, very, very big video file into it that is 4K or 5.6K. That's right, 5.6. You got 4K TVs probably in your family room right now. They're coming out with cameras that go beyond that. And honestly, one of the reasons I'm upgrading this is that this machine, the way I had built it 5 years ago from hand-me-down parts from my son-in-law, was absolutely choking on some of the video files I was trying to put through it. So I was forced to go out and upgrade it to some extent that I could for a machine that, basically when I say machine, I'm talking now the motherboard and processor and the memory inside this machine probably goes back to 2011. So I'm at the point now where I think it's time. Watching Kerry build machines honestly pushed me over the edge. It made me hungry to want to look into buying some parts and finally giving this thing a facelift. And I'm going to explain some things along the way. That, you know, the takeaways were, if you're relatively new at building machines or you haven't built one in 10 years, stick with Kerry's parts list. Most important is the match of the processor and the motherboard. If you stay with Intel, which is I pretty much do, and I have reasons for that go way back, you're probably okay if you know, certainly if you get a case, a different ATX case than what Kerry recommended, you're probably 99.99% okay there. If it's an ATX case and you happen to like the way it goes together and the access to it, you're probably fine there. Power supplies. If you get an 80% or better efficiency power supply and you get it at a wattage either equal to or maybe a little higher, you know, Kerry may use a 500 watt. If you get a 650 watt or 750 watt ATX power supply, again, you're probably pretty safe. Just make sure it's 80%, and maybe you want a modular. I mean, I happen to like the modular supplies where all those cables aren't hanging there that the ones I don't use, I gotta figure out how to hide out of the way. The nice thing about a modular power supply is the cables are separate from the box, and you choose the cables to plug in that you need, not the others basically stay somewhere else. They're not in your machine taking up space or tucked out of the way. So it tends to make a much neater build, and those supplies tend to be a little more money, but I think worth it in terms of cable management and just overall appearance. So we've said cases, you're probably safe. Being a little adventurous, power supplies, same thing, you could be a little adventurous. once you start getting down to the motherboard, the processor, and what I'm going to talk about today is something I don't think Kerry has got into or talked about. I could be wrong there, probably am wrong, but there's a new generation of M2 NVMe drives out there now. And Kerry tends to build value systems, and I always built value systems in the past. This is an anomaly because my son-in-law had this beautiful gaming machine with a G1Assassin gaming motherboard from 2011, and he had just built himself a new machine, and this motherboard was sitting in his closet, and I'm over there one day, and he starts realizing I know a little bit about computers, and he says, "Hey, I have this motherboard. Would you be interested?" And so he pulls out this box, you know, he pulls out this box and says, "I have a motherboard in here. The processor's already in it. The cooler was still attached. He had a Cool Master, air cooler in here, and 6 sticks of RAM. He put all the RAM this board could hold back in 2011, which turned out to be 24 gigabyte. He had 6 sticks of 4 gig each. And I'm thinking to myself, 6? I never saw a motherboard computer that had 6 sticks. Well, you've heard Kerry sometimes talk about 2-channel. The fact there are normally 4 locations for the RAM, and that they want you to put put one in A2 and the second one in B2, so that you get the benefit of the dual channel. It turns out the processor that he bought in 2011, I didn't even know they existed back then, but turned out to be an Intel 6-core processor. And the motherboard here was designed with 3-channel memory in order to complement the 6-core. So the Intel processor that he gave me with this motherboard was an Intel i7-970, which was a 6-core, 12-thread processor. I didn't know such things existed in 2011. Awesome processor. This machine built with 2011 components, except for the GPU, which I've upgraded in this machine. Actually works very comparably to my machine that came out 5 years later. So I'm hoping now, when I upgrade this machine with an 11th gen processor and a high-end Gigabyte motherboard, that I will have a machine that's good to go for another 5 to 10 years. That's my goal, and I will show you what I went through. I'll show you some of the pitfalls about how you have to be careful. If you go to some of these newer boards, you're going to find that some things will only work if you have an 11th gen processor. And not only that, the M.2 drive that you pick, you need to be careful, and you're going to have to probably spend a little more money than you think in order to get the 4th generation M.2 drive in order to take advantage of the 11th generation chip. And in fact, in one of the boards, the first board that I was looking at from Gigabyte was the AORUS Pro. And I thought I had found the perfect board. Well, it turns out I read somebody's review, and they were complaining that they had this, 10900 processor, and they found that 2 out of the 4 M.2 locations were dead to them because they had a 10th generation processor, the Z590 board on that particular model. Those 2 locations are only good if you have an 11th gen processor. It's unclear from the literature if those M.2 drives, in order to work with the 11th gen chip and in that motherboard in that location, have to be the 4th generation M.2 drives. I get the impression that had I gone out and bought a Samsung 980 1 terabyte drive, now keep in mind Samsung 980 1 terabyte drive, turns out that that drive is a 3rd generation component. You can buy it for about $119. I had to spend like 170 because I got the the Samsung 980 Pro. It turns out in order to get 4th generation performance, even though they're both Samsung 980 drives, you need to upgrade to the Pro model in order for it to be 4th generation. And then and only then can I use the CPU location on my motherboard and get the additional wonderful speed that this thing promises. It can get real tricky, particularly with 11th generation technology. The irony here is that we're about to come out with 12th generation, and naturally Intel is changing the socket. So one of the things I had to face in upgrading this with 11th generation is, do I want to wait, and probably have to pay a bigger premium and hope that Taiwan isn't overrun by China and that we can still get computer parts, which is something that, is a kind of a real concern right now. Or do I just go ahead and just hold my nose and jump in? And that's what I've done. And unlike my usual way I operate, which is more the Kerry way, which is value, get last year's model, a used car with low mileage, same type of thing. You save a lot of money, and the performance margin is probably more than worth it to be using a 10th generation or even a 9th generation chip if you can get it and the prices are down there. It's a strange world out there, and I'll tell you some of the experiences I ran into with trying to buy parts, and the fact that I was actually able to get a motherboard that cost me less than if I had gone back a step to a Z490, which is kind of ironic. What I encountered with looking at different processors, i5, i7, i9, when you start getting into 11th generation i7s and i9s, the prices will choke you. They are going up. I used to mentally tell myself, yeah, hurry up and buy it right before the price goes down. Yeah, I mean, with computer parts in the past, you pretty much, if you hurried up and bought something, you'll regret it 2 weeks later because then you'll see the prices have been knocked down. I'm seeing things go on today where, I mean, week to week, the prices jump. I had a case with the processor I bought. I decided on an i5 11600K processor. I shopped around. I saw that Micro Center, out of all the people out there, everybody wanted $270 roughly dollars for that processor. And Micro Center was advertising it for $219.95. So I said, wow, great. And I noticed the fine print on their website, out of stock. Well, that doesn't do me much good, right? I want the processor, I like the price. Now I got to ask myself, when everybody else on the planet who's selling this part and seems to have them in stock is asking, $50 more, then is Micro Center even going to get more in stock? And if they do, are they going to still hold to the $220 price? So I waited, about a week, and then I got a hold of Micro Center and I said, hey, you got those parts in stock, and are they still, $219.95? And they got back to me and says, oh, well, we're so sorry, but we're out of stock. And these are the things that they actually had parts in other Micro Center stores around the country. I noticed that in Austin they had a couple of stores that actually had the i5 11600Ks in stock. Unfortunately, I don't live in Austin, Texas. I live in Massachusetts, and my local Micro Center is in Cambridge. So what now? I went on Amazon. I listened to Kerry, and he pointed out that, you know, you got to look over to the right and see what they might have out there as Amazon returns and what have you. It turns out there was somebody on Amazon who was selling parts that were pulled from new computers, i5 11600Ks. So technically they're used, but they seem to have hundreds of them, and they were asking $225. Well, I said, well, you know, I would have preferred getting it in a box from Micro Center and not have to even think about worrying about getting a used part, but they seem to be selling a lot of these. I saw the numbers remaining, you know, drop every day. So I jumped in and I ordered the part from this company through Amazon, and I also bought the M2 drive, and again I had to step up to the 980 Pro because I wanted 4th generation. I didn't want to buy the 980 and only to find out that it doesn't work, you know, in that motherboard, in that slot. And so I bought my parts and I got them, and I even visited Micro Center a week later with my son-in-law just to do some window shopping. And I'll talk about that when I talk about this case and some of the things I saw in Micro Center. It's like a candy store for people like me. They were still out of stock on the i5s. So I'm shopping around the candy store at Micro Center, and again, they hadn't got the i5s in. I was a happy camper. I got my part in the mail. It looked great. Obviously not in a retail box, but well protected in the plastic bubble package that you normally would find in the retail package. It looked totally unused, pristine, and I'm expecting good things from it. But of course, I go into Micro Center's website. I get an email from them, you know, with some sales teasers that made me want to log in. And while I'm there, I figured, well, geez, I wonder if the Cambridge store got more stock in. See, these parts are in-store only, and the fact that they may have had them in Austin or in Chicago did me no good, because it's in-store pickup only. So I dial in the i5 part into Micro Center's, you know, search engine, and lo and behold, they have the parts back in stock, and they're still $219.95. And of course, I already have my part, and I would have happily bought it from them. Unfortunately, c'est la vie. I could have saved, if I hurry up and I waited, I could have saved $5, but that's actually good to see, because that used to be the way things were in this business. You know, if you're willing to wait and you're willing to get, you know, something brand new that is just the last item on the market, usually the prices drop like a stone that first year, even though they're brand new parts. That's why you can pick up an i9 900K, I guess, or 10th gen parts. Although 10th gen parts are still getting a heck of a premium. I'm suspecting some people actually prefer them, and I can understand why, by the way. When I get into the story on the motherboard and the fact that a lot of the M2 spots, and depending on the board, you got to read the fine print, you may find that some of those M2 slots on the motherboard, where you thought you had like 4 locations to put M2 drives, that 2 of them are only function with Rocket Lake 11th generation Intel parts. And you got to be aware of that. The other thing I'm going to talk about is that, again, from the same manufacturer, you may find that when you plug something in, like the M2 card, it may actually share bandwidth with one of the PCIe cards. And it may also knock out one or more of your SATA ports. It really varies motherboard to motherboard, even within the same company. So that's what caused me to step up with the motherboard I purchased, because the one I thought was the perfect board for me I found out that 2 of the 4 lanes only worked with Rocket Lake. And oh, by the way, they had to be 4th generation M.2 drives. And there were other things in there of dependencies. For instance, if I plug a card, and that's even true with the motherboard I have, if I plug a second PCIe anything into the second slot, it's normally 8X, it actually causes the slot that the video card is in to be cut in half. So I have a card now with 3 PCIe slots, and I'm going to note to self, never stick anything in that middle slot, because as soon as I do, the X16 PCIe slot I have my video card plugged in is going to knock back to 8X. Well, that kind of sucks, but that's what happens with some of these boards. Also, like as I said, you may find that when you actually put an M2 card in a particular spot, that one or more of the SATA connections that you might have been using for an old hard drive or DVD drive or whatever actually becomes non-functional. So, you know, you really have to do your homework, which is why I say if you're going to build a machine and you're a relative novice or you haven't done it in years, buy the parts that Kerry recommends in his 8-year builds. And when it comes to the processor, the motherboard, and the M2, you want to make sure that you stick with what Kerry told you. You'll be a happy camper. If you think you're going to be smart and get something different, you're going to need to do a little bit of homework. That's my suggestion. Do your homework if you deviate from his parts list. Okay, I've spoken enough about this computer and the things that I do and I need my computer to do for me. Out with the old and in with the new. We used to joke at my job of what we would refer to as bag o' parts. And this is my bag o' parts for this build. And again, my thanks to Kerry for the encouragement and the knowledge he's shared. I'm going to just show you the parts that I am going to upgrade this machine with. Let me start with the motherboard. The AORUS Master is considered on the mid to high end of the Gigabyte motherboards. It has lots of advanced features. This is a very, very armor-plated board. It has 3 M.2 positions. The first one, which is 4th generation, which means it'll work with the cards like the 980 Pro from Samsung. That's also a 4th generation card. I know that a lot of people on the internet have been debating the value of these 4th generation M.2 cards. The benefits they claim are marginal and maybe not worth the price. I felt that with my needs and the kind of processing that I do with these computers, that I'd be well served by stepping up to the best that's out there. Again, it's only fitting since this is replacing the G1Assassin, which I'll tell you, in its day, even today, 10 years later, is a really impressive board. I'm going to couple this with an i5 processor, which again may seem a little strange, but a lot of the programs that I've been running don't seem to be bothered even by my 4-core, 6th generation processor. The bottleneck is more the GPU. I have a somewhat modern GPU. I'll be putting into this build a GTX 1650 Super. The reason I happen to have that particular GPU is that it also fits into my Dell XPS machine and doesn't have tremendous power demands. So it actually can work in the Dell, it can work in this machine. The one I had in here, the GTX 1060, is now in my Dell, and I have pulled the 1650 Super for this build. Perhaps when the prices of GPUs start getting more reasonable, I most likely will upgrade in the future. But right now, the prices have gone insane. For what I paid for this 1650 Super, which was maybe $150, and I actually, within the past year, bought that GTX 1060 6GB card, probably 4 years old, in great shape, by the way. I could probably flip those cards today and make a couple of $100. My son-in-law bought an RTX 3090. You don't hear about 3090s much, because right now they're going for like $3,000 or $4,000 just for the GPU. Nice card, great space heater, and hopefully will meet the demands of what he's building right now. I don't know if I would want something that aggressive in here. There may come a time when I'll update the processor to an i9, but right now at $500, I don't think so. So one of the rationales behind the choice of i5 is the fact that it was 6-core now. It has a lot of respect by gamers for being a fairly decent chip, and I think it'll suit my needs for a reasonable price. As I say, I'll keep my eyes open, and if something better comes out on the market or at least the price of the i7s and i9s becomes more reasonable, I certainly will upgrade. I'll have that potential here. I did not want to wait for 12th generation. I mean, that would set me back a year or more. The prices when that first hits the market are going to be probably astronomical. And let's hope we can continue getting computer parts, because many of the things I'm probably putting in this build are coming out of Taiwan. And that's right now, as you've probably heard the news, there's a lot of concern there. By the way, I spent my life working with electronics. This is called a wrist strap. If the quality assurance people at my former company saw me not wear one of these, I would probably get some interesting emails. Electrostatic discharge is real. If you live in Phoenix, Arizona, where the average temperatures are, 95 degrees on a cool day, and you don't have much static electricity, you're fine. If you handle your product the way Kerry handles his product, and you'll notice me without even thinking whether I have this wrist strap on or not, I will always reach over and touch some ground contact on this case, or in the case of the motherboard, I will pinch the corner where the screws normally go in, and if you look, you'll notice they bring some of the ground plane up to those corners where your screws go in, so that when you install the motherboard in your case, you're actually grounding to the metal of the case. If you're in New England in the wintertime, and depending on what shoes you have on and what kind of carpet you own, I've drawn 2-inch sparks up here, and I have seen damage done by electrostatic discharge. I have had circuits fail on me because some phantom came in at night, we guessed, and blew a component up, and you scratch your head and say, how the hell did that part ever go bad? And that was before the days that people started recognizing the damage that a high voltage spark can do to some of these circuits. There's a reason why modern electronics can hum so quickly compared to what we had 40, 50 years ago, and I'm sure I could go back and lower the frequencies even more. The voltages required to run these parts is now very small, and depending on how the chips are designed, they can be very, very susceptible to damage, even from the low currents that a static shock will put in. But if that voltage is big, and that's what makes static electricity, huge voltages and that current discharges quickly into the wrong place, it can fry circuits. So by touching the grounds, by picking the boards up by the edges, by putting your fingers where the screw holes are, you can bring everything down and you have no problem. And I think even Kerry, I'll admit, 99.99% of the people will never have a problem. But if you're in New England in the wintertime, be really careful, my friend. I was actually watching Kerry the other night build a system up, and I was watching it so I could see how he installed the Mugen 5 cooler. And then in the course of that, he made some comments that made me think, wait a minute, the socket in this 10-year-old board may or may not be able to support this new motherboard. It may, in fact, because the Mugen actually mentions that it could work on the G1Assassin, but interestingly, if you get the black version of the Mugen, it would not. The black version of the Mugen 5 is about $10 more. It would work. It'll work on the new motherboard, the AORUS Master, but they didn't list the G1Assassin socket, you know, from 2011. So I said, geez, I thought the only difference between this model that's basically silver and the black model was just you know, the fact that they anodized, you know, the black one, but apparently there's more to it than that. But I had bought this thermal grease. What I want to talk about here is thermal grease. I was going to repurpose the cooler that is already in the machine. Probably not a good idea because of the difference in sockets. And so I went on eBay and I figured, hey, it's thermal grease, right? It's, you know, maybe a 10 micron layer just to fill in any gaps that might be between the two flat metal plates, and what's the big deal? So I did my usual sort from price, low to high. I saw this stuff. They claimed it was silver. So I got 3 tubes of it, and when I got it home, I'm thinking, wait a minute, thermal grease isn't supposed to be electrically conductive. What the heck is in this stuff? It doesn't really say silver anywhere on the tube that I got here, but it did have a part number and a company, so HY610. So I figured, well, let me go on the internet and see what they say about this stuff. And lo and behold, it was actually a table where somebody had evaluated this thermal grease, and it didn't look too good to me. So I almost called my son-in-law and says, hey, yeah, you know that grizzly thermal grease you just bought? Now, you think I could pinch a pea size? Anyway, the long and the short of it is, I decided, you know, I ought to just go and order a Mugen 5. It'll come with a decent thermal grease, and I'll feel a lot better knowing that what's in there will, you know, do a decent job cooling. It turns out there are, Tom's Hardware in particular there are tables and tables of thermal grease evaluating, you know, ones that are sold under some name brand, and even tables that talk about the ones that are bundled or included with air coolers. And found some great tables by a Google search. Funny as all get out. It turns out that the thermal grease provided with the Noctua and the Scythe are very close. The Noctua thermal grease is maybe 0.4 of a degree, you know, which is virtually within probably the error of measurement from what Scythe provides. And I also found out on the table that if all you have is denture cream or toothpaste, go for the denture cream, because it's better than Procter & Gamble toothpaste, which both run typically 10 or more degrees warmer than a decent thermal grease. But I thought it funny because in a pinch, apparently you can use denture cream. Who knew? Okay, the other parts. The processor. Again, I wound up getting this on Amazon. There's apparently a bunch on sale again on Amazon. It's the Intel i5-11600K unlocked. It has 6 cores and double that if you talk about threads. Built-in video if I decide to use it or I need that to troubleshoot at some point. If there are problems with the video card, for instance. Good thing to have. Kerry mentioned in one of his videos that the K models tend to run about 10% faster. That's good for me. I don't think I'll ever overclock, although if I had bought higher speed memory, I might have gone into the BIOS and enabled the motherboard to actually use that extra bandwidth. I didn't. I stuck with 3200 megahertz memory. This is Corsair Vengeance LPX. I got 32 gig here, two sticks of 16. Given that I do a lot of video and imagery, video, pictures, I thought I'll go with more memory, and this way if I upgrade it in the future I can go up to 64. And I may or may not do that someday, but it was worth getting this. The other thing that I looked at, this is Corsair Vengeance LPX, but again I paid a few more dollars for this to get the cast latency of 16. I had a laugh the other day. I had on this guy who was, let's just say he was giving his 2 cents of what he thought about a lot of the stuff that we both like. And he casually pulls out this memory, and he's got 2 sticks of 16 gig memory. I forget what brand it was, G-Saw, whatever. Cast latency of 14. I'm thinking, whoa, I didn't know that you could get DDR4 memory with that kind of performance. So I went into PCPartPicker.com. If you've never gone on PC Part Picker and you like window shopping, if for no other reason, that's a great site because you can build a machine virtually, basically compare motherboards, compare CPUs, decide which socket type you want to use. So it'll narrow the amount of information there. For instance, I was interested in Rocket Lake, 11th gen i5, i7, i9s. So I was able to narrow down the list of parts. I could then sort by price to get an idea. And I'll tell you right now, the price I paid and the price you could get this i5 at Micro Center was way less than what they claim was the best deal out there. So I would take the prices they give you with a grain of salt. You may find you could do better. I'm not sure why Micro Center wasn't on their list, but clearly they were selling this they are selling this for $50 less than most of the other big box stores or internet stores. So I decided, well, gee, let me see what he might have paid for his RAM kit, and he probably gets this stuff free. I should wish. And to get equivalent memory here with a cast latency of 14, DDR4, I think he had 3600 instead of 3200. But that memory would have costed me more than twice what I paid for this memory. It was up pushing like the $300 mark, and this was about $135 for this kit. So just saying, it's good to be king and have people send you boxes of RAM. I mentioned earlier about the fact that M2 drives now, there are different classes, and luckily I had always heard good things about Samsung, and in fact the solid state drive in the machine here is actually a Samsung SATA 500 gigabyte solid state drive that I obviously bought 4.5 years ago, and no problems. I was originally thinking of putting a 2 terabyte stick in this machine until I choked on the price, and then I realized that, well, I already have like a 2 terabyte hard drive in here in addition to the solid state 500 gigabyte drive. I'm going to probably leave both of those in there, certainly the hard drive. And I never really overfilled the 500 gigabyte solid state drive here with Windows 10 and the applications I generally run. So I figured, you know what, let's go for the 1 terabyte. If I decide down the road that I need more, this won't go to waste. I'll just move it to another location. But the Pro makes all the difference in the world. If I had gone and this, I think right now this, I paid roughly about $170 for this 1 terabyte in order to get a class 4 Samsung 980 drive. You can go and you will find that you could buy a 980 without the Pro on it for like $120 for a 1 terabyte stick, but it's class 3, and I'm not even sure it would work in the CPU position on this motherboard, because again, the Rocket Lake makes provisions for extra lanes in the PCI run that this thing talks to the CPU on, and you need class 4 in order to take advantage of that. The person that commented about the AORUS Pro kind of alluded to that when he pointed out that he had a 10th generation processor in a Z590 level motherboard, and 2 out of the 4 M2 positions were dead to him. So he was kind of moaning, you know, I should have gone out and bought the Elite, which is actually a half a step down from the Pro. It would have given him, you know, usable, I think 3 usable M2 positions, and he wouldn't have had to have dealt with, you know, not having use of those extra M2 positions. And not only that, again, if you read the fine print on the Pro version, it actually shares bandwidth with the X16 slot. So if one of those positions, I forget if it's the B slot, that one of the positions on the AORUS Pro version shares bandwidth with the PCIe connector, and I believe you knock your video card from 16 down to 8x, or don't hold me to that, but the fact that there's any relationship whatsoever between the M2 memory and one of the PCIe slots where I may plug a card in made me stop for a second, and I don't see that note on the AORUS Master. Now that doesn't mean that it may not do it. You know, maybe they just didn't bother writing it down, and the truth is I'll probably never know if I build this, and you know, the fact that I use that M2 knocks down the speed, but such is life. You know, as Kerry points out, you could build these machines bass-backwards and they would probably still work, and most users would never even know, because for day-to-day use, unless you're doing benchmarks and really checking what's going on, you could easily have misbuilt a machine. It functions, it does what you want, and life is good. It's just the way it is. So now we'll get to the part where I'm going to open this case, and you'll get a peek inside before I pull the G1Assassin out. And again, the motherboard and everything in there, except for the power supply and the memories for the hard drives. The hard drives and the power supply and most of the stuff in there is circa 2017, January 2017. The motherboard and processor is, again, 2011. But it's time to retire it. Before I crack this case open, I thought I should talk about the case, because that was where I started back in 2017. The G1Assassin is an eATX. It's much bigger than the standard ATX board. This will accommodate that. I think this will even accommodate a micro ATX. So after I pull the motherboard that's in there out, I'm going to have to be very careful and look to see where the bosses are to screw in the ATX board, make sure they're in the right place, and that there's nothing in a location that could cause a short circuit. I should point out, by the way, though, that the AORUS Master is a heavy, heavy, heavy motherboard, and it has armor plating on the front and the back. In fact, I brought a scale out. I wanted to weigh it just to give you an idea of. Let's do that now. I say it's heavy. It feels heavy. How heavy is it? Okay. This will be in pounds and ounces. 4 pounds, 2.5 inch ounces. Can you imagine that? 4 pounds, 2.5 ounces. Heavy. Let's get some light on the subject. And if I have one criticism of Kerry, he needs to get a light. I hate looking at this black hole inside the machine. All I want to point out here is that you can see up here there's the kit with 6 sticks of memory in here for the 3-channel. It's a Cool Master fan, which impressed me at the time. The Mugen impresses me much more. This thing has 4 heat pipes basically. The Mugen I think has like 6, and the surface area of the fins on this are modest compared to the Mugen. So the Mugen 5 will definitely take up more room, but I think it'll do a better job cooling. And as the reviewers who bought them have pointed out, it does an incredibly good job. I did upgrade the video card here. What's in here currently is a GTX 1060 6GB drive, probably 4 to 5 years old. Originally when my son-in-law gave it to me, again, he also gave me this, which is an EVGA GTX 580. In its day, this was a tremendous GPU. It just could not cut the new video formats with 4K video, and that's why I had to upgrade. The 1060, I was told by, I think his name is Yolan, at the GoPro beta group, he's one of the admins, that people have had success with the 1060. I was able to snag this on eBay. Gently driven, shall we say, never overclocked. I thought that was a great selling point. Anyway, it arrived and it was in perfect shape. The person on eBay that sold it to me, it was, buy it now. I sent him $150 gladly, plus sales tax. And it's worked flawlessly. Again, I've also bought, and oh, by the way, if you notice, this is not as long. This is a single fan squat version. I actually had this in my Dell originally. Again, for all the same reasons I bought the 1650 Super single fan. It fit in the Dell case, which did not have enough room in back. I could have easily put a longer one in this case, but I wanted something that would work in the Dell. It requires a 6-pin power connector, as does the GTX 1650 Super, and that was good because my Dell XPS machine actually had a 6-pin power connector hanging there, ready to use. I got the 1650 instead of the 1660 because the Dell computer only had like a 450 watt power supply in it, and I did not want to overtax the power supply in the Dell, because that would have been a nightmare to try to get a higher power replacement, and I just didn't want to go there. So I stuck with the Super. The Super, I think, has DDR6 memory, if I'm not mistaken, and it works incredibly well. I just pulled it out of the Dell. I'm going to put it in this new build here. The power supply I bought was an EVGA, I think it's platinum, 650 watt P2 EVGA, 80%. I have the fan, by the way, facing into the case. I know people talk about that. This is a heavy, big monster. It generally sits on the floor, but if somebody were to do a LAN party and pick this up by its handle and put it down on a shag rug, you would choke that power supply fan. Moreover, even in my computer room, I'd probably be picking up dust and blowing it through the supply. This case has adequate fans and filters all around it. I'm not overclocking or pushing things, so having the fan of the PSU facing upward into the case made all the sense in the world. It will actually pull a little bit of the hot air in here out and blow it out the back. That means that the power supply might increase slightly in temperature because, you know, you bring in the warmer air in the case, but there are so many other fans and vents in this thing. I don't expect that the inside air temperature in this case is going to be maybe but a few degrees above the outside air temperature because of the ventilation. Anyway, so let's pull the cover off and give a closer look at what's inside here. You know, I love the idea that Kerry uses a turntable. I happen to have this in my kitchen here. It was actually probably designed more for cakes. It's a little, not quite as good as the one Kerry has, but I won't be building lots of machines like he does, so this will do, but it's a little tipsy-topsy. Again, what I love about this case is there are two thumb screws here, literally thumb screws, that I can undo. And I'm going to stick them here in this magnetic dish. Pull back, and here we go. One side down. Put that safely here. Certainly don't want to damage it. While I'm at it, I might as well undo the other side. Again, two thumb screws. And there is no window on this side, but there is ventilation. Now, I'm not going to brag about my cable management on this build. I didn't go crazy back when I built it because I knew I'd be tinkering inside. So I do use some Velcro ties. Again, I mentioned that the memory hard drives, solid state drives, plug in back here. I currently have this loaded with a DVD drive, a Blu-ray drive, and then that accessory panel that has the extra USB 3 ports on it. You can see here the back of the processor heatsink. So it's a very accessible case to work with. Let's turn that around. I already mentioned what's in front here. Again, there's plenty of ventilation here. You notice there's a fan here on the side that actually came with the case. There's a fairly big one in back, and then there's one up here on top. This case was made to be able to handle water cooling. And again, consistent with the Assassin theme, you'll notice the heatsink on the Northgate and Southgate, I think, chips that are in here look like a clip for an M16. Who knew? Let's just zoom in. We might as well get a last look at this, because once I take it apart, it's going to go into a box and may or may not ever be used again. We'll see. Again, this is an EATX motherboard. It's bigger than an ATX. If you notice, it virtually goes all the way from here, almost touches the power supply down there. So it's a big one. This is the heatsink I was talking about. If you look real close, you actually see what looks like a bullet in there. Hey, you know gamers. Let's zoom in here a little bit. Yeah, they call it, this was the G1 Killer series. You know, just the right title to entice gamers to, you know, pay that extra $500 or whatever this thing cost back then. You can see that I do tend to use the SATA ports here. Again, I'm running, you know, a solid state 500 gigabyte Samsung drive, a 1 or 2 terabyte Seagate SATA drive. I have the the DVD and the Blu-ray drive, and so it adds up really quick. Interestingly, on this this board was kind of ahead of its time in some respects. That a couple of those SATA ports, I come to find out, were like 6 gigabyte per second. In other words, the two on the end here, that you see the white there, those actually had a special chip, and that's one of the things about this motherboard. It used a lot of special chips in it in order to get what at the time was state-of-the-art performance, like the Bigfoot Ethernet chip, you know, that promised all kinds of great speed. And you know, the SATA, the fact that 2 out of the 8, that's right, 8 SATA connectors were like extra high speed. Again, that's a thing of beauty. The new motherboard, again, a lot of the connections are going to be very, very close. The 24 pin power connector is roughly in the same place. The SATA connectors are roughly in the same place. You know, they will be on the new motherboard. The main difference here is that the USB 3, and let me back out a little bit, the USB 3 connectors on this are this motherboard are down near the bottom, as are the USB 2 connectors. On the new master board, they show up here, up on the side, so that's an easy adjustment cable-wise. The front panel connector is virtually in the same place, and the audio connector on the other side is roughly in the same location. So it should be an easy upgrade. We hope. There's always that first time, and you know, the nerves of getting something that's DOA. But I wanted for posterity to at least take a snapshot of what the From 2 is, and this is the From. It's going to be retired for a second time, and who knows, if somebody gets this board in the future, it may have a third life. I thought it would be fitting, now that I've taken the G1 Assassin out of the case, to get some parting shots, if you will, of the motherboard before it goes back into storage for the second time. It is a thing of beauty. I can believe that someday it will probably run again. You can see it's a EATX, so it's slightly longer than the new board, which is here. But time marches on, and it's done a great job for me and my son-in-law. So I will miss it, but I will certainly enjoy the new build.